All right, let's get right into it. Today we are deconstructing a piece of source material that has a pretty intense title to say the least, the dominance gaze. And it's all about let's say, a radical and maybe even unsettling way to think about eye contact. The whole argument really hinges on this one very confrontational idea. The source basically says that when you break eye contact, it's not just a casual social thing, it's a sign of fear, it's a sign of submission. So right off the bat, a totally normal human interaction is being framed as a battle.
And there it is. That's the core promise. This isn't about, learning to connect with people or build rapport. The goal here is to weaponize eye contact, to make sure that you are always the last one looking. The aim is right there in plain sight, to establish psychological control.
So let's dig in and get a really clear definition of what we're talking about here. What exactly is the dominance gaze, according to the source material?
And here we go. It's not just one look, but a whole toolkit of specific techniques. And you can see the key words right there, loud and clear. Dominance and control. That is the stated goal, no bones about it. The source is really careful to make this distinction. We all talk about having confident eye contact, but the source says this is something else entirely. It's in a completely different ballpark. And this chart just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you've got everything that goes into healthy communication, right? Mutual respect, trying to form a connection. But on the other side, well, the goals are pretty different. Forcing respect, gaining control, and what it literally calls psychological warfare.
So the big question is, how do you supposedly do this? Well, the source material lays out 7 specific techniques. It even calls them the forbidden tricks. And these are meant for really high-stakes moments. Think about a tough negotiation, a leadership challenge, anywhere a power dynamic is everything. So let's break them down.
Okay, first up is the piercing stare. The instruction is pretty simple and kind of brutal. Just don't look away. You hold that gaze way longer than is socially comfortable. The point isn't to connect, it's to make the other person feel like they're under a microscope, to create this deep sense of unease. Number 2 is the triangle gaze. Now with this one, instead of just locking eyes, your gaze slowly moves in a little triangle, from one of their eyes to the other, then maybe down to their mouth or up to their forehead, and then back again. The claim is that this constant, subtle shifting is really disorienting and makes it hard for the other person to even think straight.
Then we have trick number 3, the unblinking focus. Just think about how a predator in the wild stares right before it attacks. It's often without blinking. Well, the idea here is to tap into that same primal instinct. By consciously blinking less, you're projecting this weird, unnerving intensity that can put someone on the back foot and they won't even realize why.
The fourth technique is super simple, but it's absolutely central to this whole philosophy. It's called the look away last, and it's basically a silent duel. Every single time you make eye contact, it's framed as a mini showdown. And according to the source, whoever looks away first has just lost a little bit of social power. This trick is about making sure that person is never ever you. Now, this next one is interesting because it's so subtle, the eyebrow flash interrupt. It's just a quick, sharp raise of your eyebrows at a very specific moment when the other person is talking. It's designed to be a pattern interrupt. We'll get to what that means in a second. That just subtly breaks their concentration and throws them off their game.
Trick number 6 is the dead eye. So with this, you're trying to just erase all emotion from your face, become a total blank slate. And the psychological effect is supposedly huge because as humans, we're wired to look for facial cues. When we get nothing back, it's really unsettling. The goal is to be unreadable, unpredictable, and because of that, intimidating.
And last but not least, we have the scanning gaze. This is when you slowly and deliberately let your eyes move over someone's face, almost like you're inspecting them for flaws. It's a nonverbal way of saying, I am sizing you up, which automatically puts you in the position of judge and them in the position of being judged. So, we've gone through the what, the 7 tricks themselves. But the real question is why? Why does the source material claim these things are so powerful? Let's dive into the psychology it says is behind all of this. This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this is the key question, right? It's one thing to have a list of weird eye contact tricks, but what's the engine that's supposed to make them run? What are the psychological levers they're trying to pull?
Okay, so the main concept that the source points to is this idea of a pattern interrupt. Remember the eyebrow flash? The whole idea is that our brains run on autopilot during normal social interactions. By doing something unexpected, you jolt the other person's brain out of that pattern. For a brief moment, it disrupts their conscious mind, and in that moment, they become more suggestible, or in this case, more vulnerable to pressure.
And it goes even deeper than that. The source claims these tricks work by hitting a whole bunch of psychological buttons at once. They're trying to trigger that ancient, subconscious threat response. That lizard brain feeling of being stared at by a predator? They're designed to exploit our built-in instincts about social hierarchies. They create confusion. The source even goes so far as to allege they can force a person's brain into a more submissive chemical state, all by getting around our conscious, thinking mind.
So when you put this all together, the techniques, the psychology behind them, you really end up at a fundamental question, a question about power, and what it means to view human interaction through this kind of lens. At the end of the day, what's really happening here is that the source material takes eye contact, which is maybe our most basic, fundamental tool for building trust, empathy, and human connection, and it completely flips it on its head. It argues for turning that bridge between two people into a weapon for one person to use against the other.
And that leaves us with this final, really important question. We all want to be good communicators. We want to be influential and respected. But in that process, where do we draw the line? At what point does being a powerful communicator cross over into just outright psychological manipulation? That's the thought I want to leave you with.